Says
Okay, I think it's
it's
recording.
good. It's good.
So thank you, Judy, for doing this on such short notice. I contacted you like 2 days ago, and
Hey, we're home now. So
we're home. And
even though
Zoom
we're
is,
working, we have lots more flexibility because we're not commuting. So
and we're learning the Zoom life, and it's quite easy. So this is going to be Keeping Democracy Alive, episode 2, which is kind of weird to say.
yeah, we'll have to have a mysterious piece of it that kind of gives maybe a hint of what might come next, or
Hopefully.
people can look forward to it.
And as said, this is Judi Bohn. She's with Facing History and Ourselves, which is an incredibly large organization working all around the world to educate the youth about the history in order to fight bigotry and hate, and prevent future bigotry and hate. And she will hopefully talk more about that.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's my very informal,
that's
probably
great.
bad introduction. So why don't you, Judi, tell people who might be listening to this about what you do as the coordinator in New England, and
Yeah.
also just in general,
Well,
what your
I'd
organization
be
is.
happy to. So, what we are actually an international organization, which most people don't realize, and we've been around for over 40 years. We have, in the last 5 years, we've always been about taking lessons from history that are either catastrophic or so incredibly meaningful that they resonate with students in a way that we can enter into a conversation with them about what choices happened along the way that created some of these moments. And one of our beliefs is that students are really moral philosophers. They are a lot smarter and thoughtful than we give them credit for. And if given the right opportunities, they will engage in difficult material and actually come out on the other end feeling as though they are empowered to be part of a democracy, which is,
Yeah.
as we know right now, fragile and requires nurturing and activism.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the work that we do has been using historical case studies. Now we're actually pivoting more towards a combination of using historical case studies like the Holocaust, the various genocides, the civil rights movement,
Mm-hmm.
along with current events, because it became clear that we couldn't turn away from the assault on democracy that we've been experiencing in this country and all around the world, actually. And we want to be sure that students have an outlet for that, a place to learn, and that teachers have a place to learn, because that's our job. We train the teachers. So,
What are some examples of current events that?
well, actually, the most recent one was we actually did a lesson. You can go online to our website. Anyone can do this and go and put in the search bar teaching with current events.
I'll put it
So,
in the description.
yeah, and you can look and you'll find lessons on racism during the COVID crisis. So one of the things we focused a lot on is very early on what was happening to Asians around the initial reporting of the virus coming out of China, and of course being reinforced in the media. So we try to give teachers the skills to help students understand how they can really critically look at the information that they're getting. And that piece is a really good example of how the media chooses to talk about the genesis of this virus, and how does that translate for various types of media outlets,
Yeah.
and what does it bring to the kitchen table,
Yeah.
in your home. So that's the most, so we respond, the rise in anti-Semitism, that's been a big topic, where we look at the combination of the rise in anti-Semitism with the rise in racism and trying to help people understand that it's important to look at anti-Semitism from an historic perspective as well, instead of just what you may know as a student or a teacher, someone who has grown up in a world without the Holocaust, without some of the really large examples of intense prejudice. Similarly, with racism, to look at asking teachers to emphasize Reconstruction after the Civil War instead of letting everyone walk out and say, oh, great, Abraham Lincoln, great, we freed the slaves, and isn't that great, and everything's going to be good. And then Barack Obama got elected, and that's the end of racism, instead of what we actually saw happen. And trying to help understand what really is happening, and to acknowledge that this is an ongoing struggle, and that certain things lie deep within the psyche around institutional racism and anti-Semitism.
Sorry, I got a little distracted by your cat that just suddenly
That's Tango. Say hi to Tango.
Hi, Tango. So upon conception of facing history in ourselves, what was the original intent? Was it to highlight like specifically anti-Semitism, or was it just pretty much the same as it is today in highlighting history in general?
The basic core of the notion that students are able to understand the nuances of racism and anti-Semitism. But one thing you might not know is that Facing History was started by Margot Stern-Strom, who grew up in Memphis.
Okay.
So she grew up seeing anti-Semitism sit right next to racism. She walked past the, colored only, drinking fountain, restrooms. She was growing up during that time, and she knew about anti-Semitism, and at the same time, she also knew that no one taught about the Holocaust. So the two things together, as an educator, really concerned her, and she asked the question, how could I, as a teacher, change the way kids look at these two very important issues of society, not just as, let me teach the history, but these things that affect the way we live in a democracy, and what role do each of us have? One of our tagline is people make choices make history.
Yeah.
And I think that's, to me, a very powerful message, because what it speaks about is that's how history reveals itself. It doesn't just happen. It's not like Hitler, came overnight and then suddenly there was the Holocaust. It's not like racism, people started lynching Black people suddenly. But also from a very sort of micro view, it's also what's happening in your classroom, what's happening in your community, what's happening when you watch someone else bully somebody. And not to make this facile comparison between really terrible events, but there are certain features, small steps and small choices that people do make, and they make every day in their life. And we're trying to help people make better choices.
Yeah, so what was her name again?
Margot Stern-Strom.
Margot Stern-Strom. So Margot Stern-Strom. It's interesting that, at least to me, it seems to be like it was a pretty revolutionary idea to like introduce. It would have been in a way revolutionary to introduce that kind of curriculum and thought to a college classroom, but to introduce that to like a middle school and
that's right,
high school classroom.
And that's where, the reason is because one of the things that she did was she actually studied moral development theory. And moral development theory speaks about, well, I don't know about you, Jeremy, but did you have a good time in middle school? I mean, most kids, my own children, would say, oh my God, I wouldn't go back to middle school for anything, right? And that's the time when the identity struggles really percolate.
Yeah.
And wanting to be part of a group is a stronger pull than wanting to do whatever you think of or whatever your parents or society may say is the right thing, right? So that's why she decided that it had to happen sooner. I would actually agree with you that what would still be great would be, well, Tufts actually has, it's one
Yeah.
of the few schools. I mean, you have Steve Cohen, if he didn't already retire. You have some amazing, classes.
Yeah.
And some universities do, but there was a real, and continues to be a real reason for us to focus on those younger students.
So going back to the teachers, what you guys do with the teachers in of itself is also an incredible thing. Like, you're educating educators on how to approach such a intense conversation with
Yes,
schoolers.
I mean, if you spent time on our website, one of the things that is so unique about us, and I was on the school end before I came into work for Facing History, so I remember very well what was so attractive to me about Facing History. So first of all,
when did you join? I'm sorry.
We do. When did I join?
Yeah.
2008, but 1996 when I brought Facing History into the school district that I was in. So,
wow.
So I've been with them for a long time. And one of the things that is so powerful is that you do a very deep analysis of, as a teacher, when you come in for a workshop, it's not just like 2 hours and goodbye. Your first workshop is generally at least 2 days, and you explore all of these aspects of teaching, like what are some of the ways in which you teach this, not just what the it is, but the how. And our pedagogy, we have a whole section, we model. We have videos now. We have a wonderful online learning center where you can actually see an example of a teacher teaching a particular strategy, our classroom strategies. And the reason that those are powerful is because they're active and engaged strategies. They're ways of bringing students in and assuming their participation and actually building a community, a safe classroom community, so that ultimately over the course of, however long, if it's a semester or, of just a month or two, whatever the length of the course is, you have a chance to change the way kids look at learning.
What are some of those strategies?
Well, so one that I like the best, which I think is really good for kids who don't like to talk. So you know how in your class, you probably have this now, especially, but in high school or middle school, you have the kids that are so confident and they raise their hands, they get called on all the time. And you have the kids that don't.
Still in college, in Spanish class.
It's like it's just so, it's like, how can you break that down? And so 2 things that are very introductory strategies that I think are simple but so meaningful. For example, they might put a quote up on, in front of the room based on something that they were reading. And they'll just very casually, just like the way you said to me, we're going to have this informal conversation. They'll say, okay, I want you to turn to the person next to you and I want you to give them, 3 reasons why you agree or disagree with that quote. So immediately you're engaged. Now, another one that they do for people who don't love speaking is they have something called big paper. and they'll put paper up on the board with different parts of the lesson that they want you to reflect on. And everyone walks by and makes a comment. And then you go around again and you comment on the comments so that you get a sense of how people are interpreting. The teacher also gets a sense, I'm hoping that they're going to be able to see this, but I see that they're not, they're only seeing this or whatever. So it's very revealing, but it's done silently, completely in silence. And I think but the most important part is that establishing what we call a reflective classroom. And that's, sort of setting the ground rules right from the beginning, contracting with students, saying, here's the way, it will work in here. Let's develop some of these rules together. And some of them will be rules that I'll bring to the table, but I want you to bring some of them to the table too. So again, modeling democracy, I guess, is a good way to look at that.
Yeah. I kind of wish that my middle school experience was like that.
No kidding. I know.
Yeah.
It's just.
It's crazy I've had the big board thing, idea, not thing, was something that my philosophy professor used in class, and he was very good at like recognizing people's comfort zones and risk zones and having us like work in and out of those.
Yes.
And I think it's a really incredible way to teach, and get people engaged. I was looking at your website, and something that really struck me was just your use of videos and the online resources.
Yeah. I mean, they're amazing.
Accessible.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that most people in the days when I first started, I must say we didn't have as much of that. And what we really want to break down, we want people to be able to get information in a way that they can really understand it. We use videos, both some of the ones that we produce for the historical case studies. So you can pop in, you can go on a case, like if it's the Holocaust, and you can go teaching about Kristallnacht, and you'll find something, not only the amazing lessons that you could use depending on how deeply you want to go, but a really pointed video. We spent a lot of time curating and we developed most of them ourselves. So they're not clips of somebody else's work. Yeah. They're work that we worked with someone. And they really add to this dimension of teaching that gives all the different learning styles a chance to engage as well. So, in a lot of ways, Facing History Now is so different from the way it used to be, where it used to be a lot of opportunity for decision making on the part of the teacher, like, oh, what reading should I use? But as the years have gone by, teachers are so boxed into what they must do that we had to change what we did. We had to change the way we presented our material so it could be simpler for them. But one of the things that we do that most people don't do is, of course, we do try to bring, witnesses to history into classrooms. And that's been a hallmark for many years of the work that we do.
Like
survivors and civil rights. Pardon me?
Directly into a classroom or into a lecture hall?
No, into a classroom.
Oh, wow.
We do it, of course, also for like full, like all of grade 8, but we don't just do it as, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we had a speaker? Like, you can't just call Facing History and say, oh, I just would like to have a speaker. But these are for our teachers that are immersing themselves deeply in the work. And that's part of what they can access through us. Yeah. Of course, it's a lot more difficult now. So, I mean, we have survivors of, other genocides, civil rights leaders as well, immigrants who talk about the immigration journey. But who knows what we'll be doing in the not too distant future whenever people get back to classrooms. But right now we're still doing this and zooming in. So it's,
Oh wow. Okay.
yeah.
So are teachers, is it like teachers get a certification or?
Well, it's interesting that you should say that, because we actually talked about this at one point. Like, wouldn't it be cool if teachers could get licensed or certified? We haven't, we never really finished doing that. I mean, but basically, once you attend one of these sessions, you become you're assigned to a program associate depending on where your school is. So you have a built-in follow-up, a person, an educator, a master teacher who can do the follow-up work with you as you try to figure out what you want to use in your classroom. It's a big decision.
And for those who don't know, who are listening, Facing History and Ourselves is not strictly in America. It's
international. So we have an office in London, where we do all of our international work, which we do it in Ireland, France, South Africa, and Israel now, Canada. We have an office in Toronto as well. And we have several regional offices in the United States as well. And if you're lucky enough to be close to one of our regional offices, that's where you can come for a workshop live whenever we get back to doing live workshops.
Yeah.
They happen over the summer, are the intense workshops, the seminars that are 4 days long. And during the year we have them. We always have self-paced online learning, we have one right now that's going on for Reconstruction, actually. So there are always online learning opportunities, and there are small, like 1 day or 2 day workshops that we do over the course of the year. But the real in-depth work is done over the summer, so that teachers, hopefully, who have time off, can use that time for their own professional development. So.
Yeah. So 2 more questions and then we can wrap it up.
Okay.
So the first one is a little anecdote first. So in my Spanish class this semester, for the first time, it was quite incredible. I was in a Spanish class that wasn't strictly focused on like learning grammar and basic rules of the language, and rather focused more so on conversation and studying a more specific topic. So the theme of the class was the land and the indigenous people, and pretty much like what we need to be doing in order to make the world a better place. And so oftentimes when I was given a prompt, I was asked, so for this, like, how can we mitigate these issues, and what can we do to address the issues in the world, or blah blah blah. And most times, not only myself but my classmates as well, we found ourselves talking about education and the importance of educating people. And you guys are going into countries all over the world and providing educations of the rhyme of history, of how history repeats itself to kids before they even understand the importance of it. How has that inspired you? Like, how has it changed you since you've come in 2008?
Well, I must say that if you walk into a Facing History classroom, you can never look back. So that's how I left public school to come to work for Facing History. And also, I have been to some of the countries that we've been doing work in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, for example. But what I would say that's very inspiring but stressful at the same time is just knowing. So our classroom journey involves first looking at yourself. That's why it's called Facing History and Ourselves, and looking at what makes your identity. How do we define ourselves? How do we define a nation? If you just look there and you look at our own country and you look at how we have defined ourselves. Now, we all make up our own story. Every country makes up its own story about who they are.
Yeah.
And I think it's a real eye-opener to students to understand that that's actually a story.
Yeah.
That it's not, history is his story. I mean, it's like I learned about the founding of this nation differently probably than you did.
Mm.
But the basic story, or the people who aren't in that picture, to your point about indigenous people, the people who aren't reflected in the narrative that we choose, we at Facing History are trying to help people to pay more attention to that. When the Constitution says we the people, who's we?
Yeah.
At the time, the we excluded many people. And so when I look at why are we dealing with what we're dealing with now, with Black Lives Matter, with rising anti-Semitism, with the election of our current president, you can understand it when you look back and you see how we chose to define ourselves and how much economic factors have influenced a lot of the decisions that people have made. So I'm very inspired by Facing History to think that we're always going to be helping teachers help students to ask those questions. And I continue to be hopeful that people who are exposed to that kind of thinking and that critical analysis of both the written content and the media content will make a difference in our world by actually adding another voice that offers another perspective.
Yeah, you kind of hinted at my final question. Just
how do you like that?
Just like what you hope for the future, and how you see Facing History and Ourselves entering into the actual real world, and with people actually acknowledging these things and recognizing the issues, how it's changing society.
Well, I mean, I think I like to look at, I'm always looking for a positive example, and I can find them. It's not hard for me to find them. And I also know that, history this period in time that we're going through, there have been other difficult periods similar to this where you can look back and there will be a coming together. You ask, if you help people ask the right questions, then you can feel more confident that as you move on to the next phase of what's going to be revealing itself, right, in terms of what we learn from this period that we're in right now. You can only hope that there's enough knowledge and interest, and I think there will be, because I think I kind of look and say, listen, if there were so many young people that wanted Bernie Sanders, who had so much support, if those people can get in, if they can get into being real activists, feet on the ground, not just to vote, but to do this work, that's what you need. A lot of us, we were products of another generation. We were on the streets protesting the Vietnam War, trying to make a better society, and that's what I hope is going to happen again. So, and I have faith, Jeremy, because I think somebody like you could do that.
Thank you. I love that that's kind of where we're ending, because I've been saying that about Bernie. Like, Bernie's campaign wasn't necessary. It wasn't about him, and it wasn't about him becoming president. It was about who he was representing. And even if you don't like the policies that he was supporting, you gotta love and respect how diverse his supporting group was and who was truly represented in that supporting group. Um, Quite incredible, and it was full of young people like myself and even
Yeah.
younger people who couldn't even vote but just wanted to go out and support. So yeah, really happy that you said that.
Well, and you know what? Those folks need to make sure that they look at the big picture now and say, I can make an impact and take what I learned from his candidacy if I get myself in there. Because if you sit by the sidelines, nothing's going to change. And that's the one thing
Yeah,
I know. And we talk about, choosing to participate. That's what we say. You've got to make that choice.
gotta be an
You can't
ups
just stop. Yep, you got to be an upstander. You can't just stop because you didn't get the outcome you wanted. You've got to keep plowing forward. So
step by step.
onward.
So this is not even a question, just the closing. How can people get involved or contribute to facing history and ourselves?
Well, I mean, it's hard to get where a nonprofit, since it is Giving Tuesday, they can, if they want to go online and donate, they can do that.
Also,
But I think making, we don't really have we did have an intern program. So that's something you can look forward to in the future. You can
okay.
apply to that, but you can also, ask for courses in your college. You can go and find out if someone retires who's teaching using the Facing History model and they're leaving, do you really want to let that just go by the wayside? So
Mm,
if you're committed to the learning, I think you should try and see if you can make sure it's available to your students, your fellow students over there. So,
awesome. Thank
all
you, Amy.
right. Thank you,
I
Jeremy.
called you Amy because I was.
That's okay. I'm not Amy, but that's
I
okay.
know. Thank you,
Good
Judi.
luck with all your work. And I'm sure I'll run into you maybe for real next year.
Hopefully, no, definitely. Thank you so much. This was episode 2 of Keeping Democracy Alive. Thank you.
Thank you.